If you spend any time talking to carnivores online, you probably have met people who can't buy beef from the grocery store. When they do, they have some kind of odd allergic reaction. This conflicts with something that we're often told, which is that beef is one of the very few foods that human beings aren't allergic to in any way. So the cause of this problem often leaves people confused. Today I have a quick look at the four main driving factors for this problem. I'll give an honorable mention for a fifth reason at the start, but that one is not a widespread problem, and that is the Lone Star tick. Look, if you've been bitten by one of these critters and have had the reaction that has left you now allergic to mammal meat, you already know why you can't eat meat. But it's not a huge problem, at least not yet. And it's not causing carnivores especially to question why they're having unexpected problems buying meat from their neighborhood grocery store. So the first of the problems is one that's fairly simple. Some stores have a practice where their butchers inject meat with water, salt, and chemicals to replace the flavor and restore the tenderness that was lost with the fat. They've been doing this with turkey and chicken for years. The classic process there is to inject turkey or chicken with broth or water and salt. They do that because they overtrim the meat, because we in the West now have become pretty stupid when it comes to nutrition. We're afraid of animal fat, so we cut it off when we want that. But also remember that your watery broth injected meat comes at the same price as if it wasn't filled with broth. There are stores that sell both side by side for the same price. What this means is that you're paying more money for the meat you're getting. You're paying for the broth and the weight of that broth. It's a great grift on the part of the grocery stores. A few years ago, the Chicago Tribune talked about this in an article on this and laid out the math in pretty simple terms in this way. Quote, in 6 of 7 supermarkets I visited in New York, Washington, and Newport, Vermont, enhanced meat cost as much as untreated meat or more. Packages of treated and untreated Shady Brook Farms skinless and boneless turkey meat were $4.99 a pound at each of 2 stores in Washington. The label of the enhanced product said that it contained a, quote, 10% solution of turkey, broth, salt, and sugar, and it had 25 grams of protein in a 4-ounce serving. The untreated meat had 28 grams of protein per serving. So the actual meat in the treated turkey cost about 12% more a pound. A giant supermarket in Washington enhanced and plain skinless and boneless chicken breast cost $3.99 a pound. But after accounting for just the protein, the treated meat cost 13% more. End quote. Nice markup for almost no additional cost, and I've heard this is done to beef in some stores as well. But why would that cause you problems? After all, it's just broth, right? Well, remember, the problem is that broth has vegetables in it, unless you make it yourself. Even keto-friendly bone broths that people like on low and zero-carb diets, products like Kettle and Firebrand and a few others, have vegetables in them. Go read the label if you don't believe me. For most people, that's not a problem, but there's a funny thing that happens in carnivore circles. Your body tends to get sensitive to non-animal products during the healing process, and that could just be a microbiome gut flora problem. But spend any time in carnivore social media groups online, and you'll see many such cases of this happening. Call it an oxalate sensitivity if you want, or maybe it's a sensitivity to the preservatives in the bone broth. But it is an actual problem. But that's not the only thing that may be causing your problems with beef from grocery stores. Non-organic meats are often filled with growth hormones during the raising and rearing of the cattle. Beef is beef is beef. At the end of the day, the actual grade of the beef doesn't matter much beyond fat content, the tenderness of the meat, and that kind of thing. And I have a whole video on that subject if you aren't familiar with USDA meat standards. All slaughtering in the United States is done under USDA inspection and is graded as such, but a lot of that meat has been subjected to growth hormones. We have been assured that commercial beef with growth hormones is safe for the consumer, but a lot of people just don't agree with that at all. Here's the official line from the ever-trustworthy food and nutrition authorities in America, though. The following is an argument I actually found online of different that you can see in defense of growth hormones, and it mirrors so many other ones. I just lifted this verbatim. Quote, a common myth surrounding beef produced with additional hormones is that it is unsafe to consume. The fact is that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration regulates the development and use of hormone implants, and the Food Safety Inspection Service of the USDA routinely monitors residue of synthetic hormones in meat. It is true that beef from hormone-implanted cattle has increased estrogenic activity compared with non-implanted beef. This fact alone may alarm beef consumers, but it must be put into the context of actual amount consumed and the levels found in other products. They then tell you that beef from a non-implanted steer contains 0.85 units of estrogenic activity per 3-ounce serving, while beef from an implanted steer contains 1.2 units of estrogenic activity in the same serving. It's a 50% increase, by the way, for those who can't do math. However, this amount is a fraction of what is found in many other common foods. For example, the same quantity of eggs would provide 94 units of estrogenic activity, and a 3-ounce serving of tofu would produce 19,306,004 units of estrogenic activity. Seems like a good reason to avoid tofu. In fact, a normal adult male produces 136,000 units of estrogen per day, while a non-pregnant woman produces 513,000 on average per day, making consumption of the levels of estrogen in implanted beef relatively inconsequential. End quote. Yeah, I saw that argument online somewhere, and it lines up nearly perfectly with talking points used by others to defend the practice, to the point where it's almost funny. It's like a memo is being circulated. Now, is the practice dangerous? I have no idea, to be honest. It is low on my personal concerns list, and it may be causing you problems if you're particularly sensitive, since hormones ingested in your digestive system is not the same thing as hormones taken via a medical treatment of some kind. A third and more likely reason you or someone you love is having an issue with beef from the grocery store is that you have a corn sensitivity. This is described pretty well by the website for Verde Farms, they are the providers of grass-fed and grass-finished beef. And no, they're not paying me to tell you about them either. Quote, according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the 8 major foods that can account for 90% of all allergic reactions in people are milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybeans. However, don't be surprised if corn is eventually added to that list. That's because corn is the primary feed grain grown in the U.S., according to the USDA. Corn allergies, while still considered relatively rare, may be on the rise. The American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology has a page on their site specifically dedicated to allergies by corn and corn products. Corn production accounts for more than 95% of total feed grain production in the U.S. Corn is used as an ingredient in a variety of food and industrial products, including starch, sweeteners, corn oil, beverages that contain alcohol, industrial alcohol, and fuel ethanol. Much of America's corn crop is also used as the main food source for cattle that are being raised for beef. What does this mean for someone with a corn allergy? It means they must avoid consuming anything that contains corn, and that can include beef derived from grain-fed cattle that were fed corn. The way beef is processed and packaged can have an effect on corn allergy sufferers as well. Some packaging used for meat is dusted with cornstarch, which can trigger a corn sensitivity. Verde Farms, however, uses no corn products in the packaging of its beef. If you or family members have a corn allergy that's triggered by eating grain-fed beef, you may want to give grass-finished beef a try and continue enjoying steak, ground beef, and more that is free of corn and corn-based ingredients. End quote. That sounds weird, doesn't it? Dusting meat with cornstarch. Well, it happens more than you might think. Plus, these animals are fed corn, and that can have an impact on the fatty acid profile of the meat. This is one of the main reasons that many of your bigger name carnivore influencer doctors in the low and zero carb space tell you that you're best off eating grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And while I don't personally take that line because it's just not financially an option for most people given the cost of it, if you're in this position, this may be something you have to do. Meat can be sprayed in some places also, with the next reason here, with essentially a flavorless, odorless preservative. If you've ever noticed that you can keep beef in your refrigerator for a couple days, usually without issue if you bought it from the store, but your farm-sourced beef usually can't be, and I've noticed this myself, then you've encountered this problem. The stores keep this practice pretty close to the chest, but some of them definitely do this. Meat at the store is also often treated with carbon monoxide, which keeps the meat looking very, very red. It's why your farm-direct beef typically looks darker than the grocery store steak. You put the two steaks side by side, you'd see what I mean. And the grocery store one is often just bright red. That's from the carbon monoxide, which should be safe for consumption in general terms. And the problem with a lot of this stuff, though, is that there's precious little regulation of these practices, including the use of non-toxic chemical preservatives applied to meat. But the I would say this is probably the number one cause for your beef problem, and that is going to be histamines. And it's a huge one by itself and deserves its own video, but the short version here is that beef is aged up to 14 days as a standard part of its processing. This aging process results in the meat tasting, well, beefier and better, but it cannot cause, in a small amount of people, an allergen response due to the aging process itself. And it's a standard practice. This is all the beef in your grocery store. The only solution is to buy meat that isn't aged, but that's going to be possible only through direct purchasing from a rancher who either doesn't age the beef at all during their processing or is willing to do that for you on a special order process. The only meat seller online that I know that doesn't age their meat is Billy Doe Meats, and I can only confirm that because I've bought their lamb before, and their lamb doesn't have that weird lamby taste. You can smell it a little bit when you cook it, but it doesn't have that lamby taste because they don't age it. But I don't know if that applies to their beef. You can email any of the meat sellers online and ask them, though. Your takeaways for problems with store meat are going to be these, though. It's probably the aging of the meat from a histamine response, and it may be a reaction you're having to the animals being fed an improper, contraindicated diet for those species. I don't know where we got the idea that this is a smart thing to do with our cattle, but cows, chickens, pigs, and fish do not eat soy and corn in their natural environments. We feed them that stuff in the farming processes, and it can have an impact on the fatty acid profile. It's where a lot of the PUFAs come from in some of those animals. And it's probably it may be causing you some problems. You may be also having problems caused by the way the meat is handled at the store, either with the preservatives they put on the meat or cornstarch applied to the packaging. Your best bet is to buy directly from a rancher who will meet your needs and work with you for your business. So let me know if you found this helpful in the comments, please. Also, if there's any other things that you can think of that would cause an allergic reaction to beef. And like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. And share this on social media. That helps as well as a lot. In fact, YouTube really likes it when you do that. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore, and thanks for watching today.